Swinburne University, na Austrália. Ele está passando aqui 2 semanas conosco, como professor visitante, e vai fazer a primeira apresentação dele. Eu agradeço todo mundo que está podendo assistir, acompanhando aí online. Professor Subhash, thank you very much for that presentation. We're an expert in environmental accounting, and we are here waiting to learn from you. Okay? The floor is yours.
Thank you. So, I'd like to first thank Professor Araceli Pereira for inviting me to Rio de Janeiro and to this university. So it's a pleasure. And thanks everyone for attending today. My name is Subhash Abhayawansa, and I'm at Swinburne University in Melbourne, Australia. So you can see an image there of my campus. It's a small university compared to most other universities in Australia, but we are doing quite well in the field of economics and business, which includes accounting, in terms of research. So we were recently ranked in the top 150 that categories. We have done quite well. And our accounting department is not so big, and not everyone is research active as well, but the people who are research active in our department are doing some interesting work. So that's a bit of background of my university. Now, the topic of this presentation is talking about my research interest in social and environmental accounting. And so what I'm planning to do is to explain the main research theme that I'm exploring in my research with others, and talk a little bit about various research studies that I'm currently conducting. I'm not planning to talk about the research that I've already published, but the focus will be on the ongoing projects. So last night when I was trying to put this slide together, I was trying to find a way to organize the research that I'm doing into some themes. And interestingly, they fit nicely into these themes. Okay, so the first three are in the field of social and environmental. But the last one, which is also something I'm passionate about, is not really in social and environmental, but I will also talk a little bit about that towards the end. When you look at these 4 research themes, the first one being organizational practices related to sustainability. The second one is sustainability reporting, and the third one is capital market studies of sustainability. So you can see that I'm trying to explore sustainability from different perspectives. I like to understand how organizations are engaging with sustainability, how they're changing their practices, how they're changing their business models, and the governance arrangements around sustainability. So these are the changes that happen within organizations. And also I'm interested in understanding how they are explaining what they're doing to the public through their reporting. So sustainability reporting comes into play there. And the third thing is looking at it from the point of view of users of sustainability information. Right? So that's where I focus on investors. And more recently, I have a PhD student who is studying stakeholders of sustainability information. Because when we looked at the literature, not much has been done around how other stakeholders, other than investors, use sustainability information. Then the last theme, as I said, is not in social and environmental accounting, but it is mainly looking at how capital market actors use information. That's something that I've been passionate about for a very, very long time. Okay, so the first research theme, organizational practices. I have 4 ongoing projects at the moment on this theme. So the first one is organizational structures for engaging with sustainability. So this is a study that I did with Carolines. So we collected data a couple of years ago. We interviewed CEOs and chief sustainability officers as well as CFOs of 10 large listed companies in the UK and Australia. And we asked them about how they're engaging with the UN Sustainable Development Goals specifically, right? Because companies engage with sustainability in various ways. For a lot of companies, sustainability is about risk management, right? That is to make sure that they look at the impacts society and environment has on the organization and try to minimize these impacts, right? To manage risks or to take advantage of the opportunities that the society and environment offers. But sustainable development goals look at sustainability in a different way, right? So when organizations engage with UN sustainable development goals, they have to contribute to the society and environment. It's a different perspective. We call it the inside-out perspective. So this is what we wanted to understand, how they're engaging in it. So the companies that we selected for this study are the ones that were talking about working towards UN Sustainable Development Goals on their web pages, on their sustainability report, etc. So we expected them to be doing quite well in the UN SDGs. But what we found, so we not only interviewed them, we also analyzed their sustainability reports for about 6 years, 6-year period, and also we went and analyzed other publications associated with those organizations, produced by third parties, so newspapers and other media sources. So we wanted to understand, okay, what are they saying about what they're doing in terms of reporting? What are they actually doing by asking questions from their CEOs, chief sustainability officers, etc., and also trying to understand it from the perspective of outsiders. What are they saying? So we thought by adopting this kind of methodology, we get a quite comprehensive understanding of the organizations. So our focus was to look at the way their institutional logics or the interpretive scheme of the organization, the way the organization thinks about sustainability. How does that play among different organizations? And then the way sustainability and sustainable development goals are incorporated within their within various aspects in the organizations, like the business model, the strategy, corporate governance arrangements, internal controls, etc. So we call these design archetypes. So looking at the interpretive scheme and the design archetypes of the organization to see in one, what strategy. So when they were thinking about business strategies, sustainability was one main consideration. So it was not like they first thought about the business strategy and then, sustainability was an afterthought. No, sustainability was part and parcel of that discussion. And then it was evident that sustainability was incorporated within the organization's design archetypes as well. So that's one main. And on the other end, we had organizations that they were talking about the way they are achieving the sustainable development goals, but they were trying to just map what they were doing with the goals. The goals were not informing their practices. The goals are there, this is what we have been doing for so long, right? This is how it maps. And then when we looked at the organization, it's not integrated with the strategy. The design archetypes are not aligned. And then we have organizations in the middle. So we have these three groups. So what's interesting about this now, I mean, you might think that it's quite obvious, isn't it? I mean, organizations engage with sustainability in different ways. But the issue here is that all these organizations are communicating with the public. They are saying that they are achieving sustainable development. That's the narrative that they are all adopting. But the way they are doing it is quite different. And the organizations who are not integrating sustainability are not apologetic about it either. That's right. So for them, that's fine. So it's a different approach to engage with sustainability. So what we like to explain there is that the way organizations engage with sustainability differs regardless of the way they communicate their engagement. I think that mismatch is important to understand. Bordering, some might say greenwashing, but that's also not the idea. Okay, so that's the first study there, and the second one is a literature review study. So I also wanted to emphasize, because there are research students here, I also want to emphasize the research methods I'm adopting. So the first one is sort of case study method. We have 8 case studies, and we collected data using interviews, using content analysis of sustainability reports, annual reports, as well as media documents. Right? And then the second one is a literature review. It's a systematic literature review. This is just the start of this research project. We wanted to understand how universities engage with sustainable development goals. So through teaching, through research, through other administrative activities, as well as other external engagement work that they do. So in order to do some interesting work in this area, we thought it's important for us to understand what's been done so far. So that's why we started the systematic literature review, and it's an interdisciplinary project. So we initially we were thinking of focusing on sustainability reporting, but then we thought, no, we need to broaden it. And we are now looking at not only how universities are engaging with reporting of sustainable development goals, but how they are engaging with their SDGs as well before we go to the reporting stage. So it's still ongoing. We have finished collecting data, and now we are trying to write the paper based on data. The last one is, the third one, determinants of carbon offset project choices. Now, this is an interesting project because it is an offshoot of a research project that I supervised for one of my undergraduate students. So we have engineering students doing a research project in their final year. So this research project has 2 components, an engineering project and a business project. So this is an engineering student. He was interested in understanding how net zero housing projects can be used as carbon offset options. So you know what net zero housing is? You build a house and it has solar panels, etc. And the house is very energy efficient. It first needs to offset the emissions associated with building norms. It's called embedded emissions. Once it is offset, then you are offsetting the emissions of ongoing running of the house. So after a few years, it becomes carbon negative. So not only offsetting all the emissions, but also it's negative, right? So it's contributing energy that can be stored and transmitted to other purposes. So that's what he did for his engineering project. So the idea was, because it was in collaboration with the company that was doing net positive housing, right? So the accounting project was to look at what criteria are organizations using to decide where to purchase their carbon credits from. So carbon offset projects. There are lots of carbon offset projects, and you know there is a lot of controversy around these carbon offset projects. Yes, there are lots of fake ones, right? And there's a lot written in the media about these things as well. So how do organizations decide which carbon offset project to use? Is it based on purely cost, the cheapest one? Or is it based on the industry? If you are in the building industry, are you going to choose an offset project associated with the building industry? If you are in the energy industry, are you going to pick a project in line with that industry? Or is it about the verifiability and the authenticity of the project? So there can be lots of things, right? So we did an initial survey. So this is a project based on surveys, right? A questionnaire survey, online questionnaire survey. And we collected some data. That was sufficient for that student's project, but it's not sufficient for a research paper. So we are now extending that research, trying to collect more data to write that paper up. I think it's an interesting area because no one has really looked at how organizations decide when they purchase carbon offsets. And it's going to be a huge area, right? So countries have pledged to achieve net zero emissions. Australia is trying to do that in 2035. To be able to achieve that, companies have also made these announcements that they are going to achieve net zero. How are they going to do that? First, they need to minimize their emissions, but they can't cut emissions 100%. Any extra emissions that they cannot minimize, cut basically, have to be bought as carbon credits, right? So that's going to be a huge demand for carbon credits. It's just starting. It's going to be a huge area, so it's important for us to understand this. I think there's a lot of scope to do research in this space. And we have done a literature review, and not many research, not much research exists on this topic, especially in the accounting field. So if you're thinking of topic, that's a good area to explore, I think. Then the last one there is use of digital technologies for managing, measuring, and reporting sustainability. This is a result of a research grant we received from CPA Australia, the Professional Accounting Body. So we received this grant in 2021. We collected the data in 2022 and beginning of 2023, and I will show in my next slide the results. We wrote a report, but we said we basically asked CP Australia not to publish the report. Instead we provided an infographic, right? Because the idea is for industry businesses to use this information, right? They're not going to read lengthy reports. They want to see things, understand things quickly. So we produce this infographic for them. But we are in the process of writing a book. So we have signed an agreement with Routledge, and we are expecting to publish the book halfway next year. So that's a collaboration between, so Carol Adams is there in the team and a couple of other colleagues from Swinburne in the accounting area. So 4 of us have done this research and in the process of writing from it. I will talk a little bit more about it in the next slide. So these are the papers that are published on this topic area, so I'm not going to really talk too much about them, but you can see that the papers are also about trying to understand how organizations practice sustainability. So the first paper there, published in Subhash, looks at corporate governance factors, so countries' corporate governance factors affect so ESG performance. So it's a collaboration with a couple of people in Mauritius. Second paper with Carol and Christina, we looked at we analyzed the responses to one of the Senate inquiries that was conducted in Australia about the sustainable development goals, how to engage, what should government do about engaging with sustainable development goals. So the methodology there was analyzing the responses to the Senate inquiry. There were many responses. We analyzed those responses. We conducted a thematic analysis of that content analysis of the study. Was published in AAAJ in 2021, and then in 2020, in one of the papers, we looked at how stakeholder pressure affects the adoption of carbon management strategies. So that was with one of my PhD students that I jointly supervised with Dr. King. So I've just listed a few papers from the last 4 years. I've not listed the papers that I published before that, just to give you an understanding of the type of research that I'm doing now. There's no point talking about what I've done in the past. Focus is what I'm doing now, so that if we can have a conversation about these things, then that sort of a conversation starts. And don't wait until the end. If you want to ask questions, I'm happy to take questions on that. Yeah.
Discuss.
Sure. Right, so this is the outcome of that last project, the infographic that we created. We looked at how companies could use digital technologies for sustainability. Not only sustainability reporting, but we looked at collection of data, then the measurement of sustainability impacts and risks, then the how it's managed and reported. So the whole thing, and not only within the organization but also supply chain as well. So we try to cover the whole spectrum there to see to what extent digital technologies are used. We categorize digital technologies into 2 groups. The first group is established technologies, so data visualization tools, data analysis tools, big data, things like that comes in the established category. So basically, the digital technologies that has existed for a long time, right? And then the emerging digital technologies, right? Artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchain, this kind of stuff. Internet of Things, Internet of Everything, all these new emerging technologies. So what we found is that 50% of the organizations that we surveyed have never used or rarely used those established digital technologies for sustainability, measurement, management. That's shocking, isn't it? We're talking about technologies that existed for a long time, which we use in other areas, other aspects of accounting. And in most cases, these are like software platforms like Power BI, Tableau that you use for data visualization. 50% of the organizations are not even using those for sustainable reporting. And then 75% are not using any of the emerging technologies. This was back in 2022. Of course, AI became more popular after ChatGPT towards the end of last year, so this was done just before that. I guess if we ask this question now, most people say that they would be using AI because almost everyone is using ChatGPT now.
That's dangerous.
Yeah, that's right.
Use it.
There are pros and cons. So we looked at how widely these things are used. And then also we looked at the barriers for using digital technologies for sustainability, what are driving the use of digital technologies for sustainability reporting, and how it's being used, what are the main uses, and what future opportunities. So we also did interviews for this. So the research project involved interviews. We interviewed about 50 people from various areas in the organizations, in consulting companies as well. So we interviewed chief sustainability officers, then people from consulting companies like EY, KPMG, who are working in the sustainability space. We spoke with CFOs. So it was a very diverse group of people that we interviewed to get some interesting insights, because we want to get insights from information systems people, IT people, accounting people, and basically sustainability people. So the people that we interviewed covered these three groups. And not only in organizations, but also the consultants and also the users of these technologies, as well as technology vendors as well. So we spoke to the people who are developing these technologies too. So it was quite a comprehensive study. That's why we thought, okay, we can't do real justice by publishing this as a journal paper, because the contributions are much, theoretical contribution that we can make from a project like this is quite limited, but we can make more practical contribution based on the findings. So a book is the best outcome for it. It gives us more flexibility and freedom to talk about the implications of our findings as well, in a way that would attract practitioners and users to read this stuff.
That's quite important. It's quite important.
I think so too, yeah. Yes. It's an interesting area. I think it's very interesting because at the moment, I'm not sure what's happening here, but in Australia, in accounting education, there are two big topics. One is technology, the other one is sustainability. So we try to bring these two together. So the idea is to use that book as a resource for teaching too. So the second research theme, looking at sustainability reporting. I'm very interested in understanding sustainability standard setting, which has been an evolving area, starting with the merger of various sustainability standard setting bodies, international integrated reporting committee, merged with the ISSP, SASP, CDSP, merged together, created the International Sustainability Standards Board. So that's one thing that happened. There is I know, not there. And on the other hand, in FRB, then they issued the CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive in Europe. Then there's still GRI. How do they compare? Organizations are confused. So try to understand what is the focus of each of these standards, suite of standards, and how the materiality concept used in these standards differ among each other. So a paper that I published in Subject in 2022 proposes a new way of thinking about materiality. So I think it is quite consistent with the way you think about materiality with the concept of nature as a shareholder. So in my conceptualization, what I say is that we can't take a decision usefulness approach to thinking about sustainability. Right? So the double materiality concept, single material, financial material concept, they're all dependent on decision usefulness. So financial materiality is deciding whether a particular piece of information is important or not based on whether investors would want that information. Then in double materiality we have that plus whether state given back to the next generation in the way we inherited it, right? Because this is the concept of sustainable development. In order to do that, we need to be accountable for the resources that we use from this planet. So the International Integrated Reporting Framework talks about 6 capitals, right? So we have financial capital, manufacturing capital, natural capital, intellectual capital, social capital, human capital. So these are the resources, and each resource is provided to us by either someone or something. So if we think about sustainability as being accountable, so if you are considering human capital, you are accountable to the people who are providing you with that capital, right? Same way, nature, natural capital, you are accountable to the nature. Just because no one is interested in information about any of this stuff does not mean that you can get away with that accountability. So if we think about it from an accountability perspective rather than a decision usefulness perspective, I think we can achieve a lot in terms of ensuring sustainability of the planet. So that's the idea that I'm bringing forward in that. So that's why I say it's moving from a double materiality to single materiality. But it is not financial materiality at all. Single in the sense using accountability as a mechanism. So it doesn't matter whether it's investors or stakeholders. So that's one paper getting into that category, and the other paper is looking at the myths surrounding the establishment of the International Sustainability Standards Board, which I published with Carol Adams in 2022 in Critical Perspectives on Accounting. They had a special issue on COVID, so we looked at what was happening during COVID, and this is one of the biggest things that in the sustainability space that happened during COVID, right? The ISSP. So we basically are quite critical about the International Sustainability Standards Code and its approach, and I think one of the sessions that I'm doing next week is looking at ISSP's approach to sustainability reporting and comparing that with the GRI's approach, and also looking at the CSRD and their approach. So I'll talk more in that workshop about that. Next topic is frameworks to advance sustainability reporting. So I've done a lot of work on that topic here, looking at how sustainability reporting can be advanced using different frameworks. So the first framework I looked at was the International Integrated Reporting Framework. Now, you might know, if you have studied about it, that the IR framework has a financial materiality perspective. Now, sustainability does not sit really well with financial materiality, especially if you're thinking about sustainability of the planet, right? Because for that, you need to have an outside in as well as inside out, without a materiality perspective. Take the accountability angle. So that is an inherent contradiction. Integrated reporting was introduced as a way to advance sustainability, but the integrated reporting framework does not look at sustainability that way. But organizations are using the IR framework for sustainability reporting as well. So there is this contradiction, a paradox. So we wanted to understand how companies that are using the international integrated reporting framework are making sustainability related disclosures. Right? So I've done quite a bit of work in this space. In one of the studies with one of my PhD students and also Carol, we looked at how key performance indicators related to non-financial capitals, including natural, social, human capital, are communicated in the integrated reports of Sri Lankan companies. Sri Lanka is an interesting case. We did not pick just because I'm from Sri Lanka originally, right? That's because Sri Lanka is one of the top 5 countries in terms of integrated reporting. About more than 50% of the listed companies in the Colombo Stock Exchange prepares integrated reports. So that's a big number. So that's why we thought it is an interesting setting to examine integrated reporting, because so many companies are doing integrated reporting. And some interesting insights there. Basically, what we found is that KPIs or non-financial capitals are not disclosed adequately, and even when companies disclose these KPIs, they are not about explaining the alignment between sustainability and corporate strategy. That kind of narrative is not present in those disclosures. Then we have a few studies looking at, again, the IR framework. So the second one there, role of integrated reporting in advanced sustainability, that's the literature review. We looked at all the studies on this topic to see what problems other researchers have unveiled and what pathways are there for a company that is producing integrated reports and doing integrated thinking to be able to advance sustainability in the way that it contributes to the society and environment, not just looking at it as a risk. So that's a literature review study. And then the third one down here, that one over there, published in accounting in Europe. We analyzed the responses to the consultation that the International Integrated Reporting Framework conducted to see what other people think about sustainability and how the ability of the IR framework to advance sustainability. So from the point of view of users. Then an ongoing project, which is the paper is currently under revision. Currently under review. We just did the revision and we submitted the paper, and that looks at companies in 2015 and 2017. We analyzed the annual reports and integrated reports to see whether the adoption of the IR framework has changed the type of sustainability information they produce. Right? So basically, it's a before and after comparison. Right? wanted to find out whether the amount of financially material information about sustainability and the amount of impact material information about sustainability, how that has changed. So if the IR framework is adopted in the way it is intended to be used, then even if companies are increasing their sustainability disclosures, those disclosures would mainly be financial material disclosures, right? So that's the assumption. But if companies that are using the IR framework are going over and beyond the requirement or the stipulation, then they will be providing more impact material information, outside-in perspective. And what we find is that companies do provide more outside-in information. So, integrated reporting framework is not inhibiting companies from being more sustainable. I think that's a good finding. Talk about the last one, the impact of CEO social influence of sustainability. That's an interesting one. That research project is done with two colleagues in finance. They're from another university in a different state in Australia, University of Newcastle. We got an interesting data set. We collected information about chief executive officers' LinkedIn following, right? So we used a technology person to scrape information from LinkedIn pages of about 2,500 CEOs in the US. Right? That's a big sample, about 2,500 CEOs. Yeah. And we got someone, a freelancer, to collect information from the LinkedIn pages of the CEOs, and we are now doing the same thing from their Twitter pages as well to extend the data. So we got information about their following, the skills that are endorsed by others, and a few other variables like,
Pode colocar aqui, Bruno? Excuse me. Thank you. Okay, so and also information about whether the CEO is a top voice or not. So people are categorized as top voice and not top voice. So if a person is very active on LinkedIn, posting a lot of stuff on LinkedIn, then they get classified as top voice. So we collected all that information, and we want to find out whether those CEOs that are more influential on social media, like in LinkedIn or Twitter. Now, LinkedIn we selected because it's a professional social media platform. And then Twitter is not so professional. It's used for professional purposes, but also for personal purposes, right? So that's why we are trying to use both to see what differences exist. And to see whether their social influence is a factor that determines the amount of sustainability reporting that they do. We are looking at not only the relationship between CEO social influence and sustainability reporting, but we are looking at some other variables like their risk appetite and the way investors perceive the riskiness of the company, etc. So it extends beyond just sustainability, but sustainability, this project is just one part of a bigger project that we are conducting, because we got this data. Now we can, run a lot of different models with that data. Okay, so next, or the last one in the social and environmental accounting field is capital market studies on sustainability reporting. These are archival research studies using information from databases. The second one uses information from databases. The first one, we hand collected the information. They are both projects based on my PhD students' work. So the first one, they both have submitted. The first student already graduated. The second student's work is under examination at the moment. So examiners' results or reports will come out in a couple of weeks, I think, for the second one. So first one, that student looked at top 200 Australian companies, responses to the carbon disclosure project. I'm assuming that you know the carbon, you know a bit about the carbon disclosure project. So carbon disclosure project, they send questionnaires asking information about climate change, climate change related information, and now they have expanded that. So basically, it's voluntary for a company to respond to this questionnaire. And it has a lot of information items, right? And it's then some companies publish their response to the CDP on their website, others don't, but we can get this information from CDP directly. You pay to the CDP and you get the data set. So we got that data. We also analyzed that data to find out how companies are reporting on their climate risk. So physical risk, transition risk, etc. So one paper is going to be a descriptive study, trying to understand what risk disclosures they focus on and what drawbacks, or basically not drawbacks, I guess, what information they are downplaying. Okay, so that's the focus of that study. And then the second one is a typical capital market study looking at the impact of climate risk disclosure on firm value, analyst forecast accuracy, analyst forecast dispersion, and the variance in analyst forecasts as well. So currently, we are in the process of writing these two papers. Then the last one is something a little bit different from what people have done in this space. So yesterday, we were talking about the Refinitiv Icon ESG rankings, right? Now, they also publish a sentiment score. You can get a sentiment score and also something called a buzz score, right? ESG news sentiment and ESG buzz. What do they mean? So the ESG ratings, that's based on information mainly provided by companies, right? So the way you get ESG ratings, if you look at their methodology, if you read their methodology, predominantly based on the information companies provide themselves. But the ESG news sentiment looks at what others say about the ESG aspects of this company. It's not a general sentiment, it's about public sentiment about the ESG performance of the company, right? And then the ESG buzz score is the level of attention the company is getting from various media, right? So this study looks at whether the public perception of ESG performance of an organization is associated with various variables like firm value, forecast accuracy, etc. That's the first one. And then the second one is looking at whether we can predict the stock price crash risk based on the public perception of ESG sentiment, right? So two interesting pieces of work. They are all quantitative studies. So now you can see that I'm doing research using different methodologies. I have quantitative papers here, qualitative work based on interviews, surveys, and also quite a bit using content analysis as well. And the last one is not in sustainability, but the focus is looking at capital market actors and the way they use and consume information. My focus is normally on non-financial information, not on how capital market actors use financial information. Now, you know, capital market studies, they're mainly quantitative based on archival research. But my focus is understanding capital market actors' behaviors, practices, and their use of information using qualitative research. So basically based on interviews. Most of these studies are based on interviews. So I have published a few papers with others. The first one is a project that we recently completed, was funded by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Scotland, with a couple of colleagues from the UK. And in that, we looked at how information that is produced on a real-time basis or a quick-time basis is used by capital market actors. We interviewed sales-side analysts and fund managers. We did about 35 interviews with these people. I mean, it's not easy to get access to these people. They're very busy people, so very hard to get interviews with them. And when you catch them, you got to ask a lot of questions because it's not easy to get them. So we got some interesting findings there. We published our findings in that report. And now we are in the process of writing a paper based on that. So that's the first one there. Currently, I'm writing a paper looking at investor relations officers, how they have been affected by a particular regulation called MiFID II, which is effective in Europe, right? Basically, that regulation has had a huge impact on the field of investment advice because it has reduced the power of sell-side analysts, increased the power of fund managers and investors, and also has significantly affected the capacity to operate of corporate brokers in the UK. And all that means investor relations officers are now very, very busy. And so the power that they wield in the field of investment advice has increased significantly because of this piece of legislation. So that's the focus of that paper. Hopefully, it'll get published soon. Then I've also looked at the way analysts operate in the capital market, sell-side analysts, looking at the way the changes that are happening in the capital market, the way analysts are responding to those changes, and how analysts use information. So for instance, this paper, the last one listed there, looks at whether analysts really think integrated reports are useful. Now, there's a lot of archival research saying, showing that integrated reporting is associated with firm value. Integrated reporting reduces the information asymmetry, all that. But we wanted to understand from the user's perspective by asking them the question, do you use integrated reports? So this was done back in 2019, and we specifically interviewed analysts who were covering companies that were producing integrated reports. Majority of them did not even know that the company that they're covering produces an integrated report. And they don't find integrated reports useful. So if we say that integrated reports are catering to the needs of capital market actors or investors, then analysts should be using that information because analysts are a proxy for investors. Analysts are expert users of financial and non-financial information in the market. Right? They analyze companies and they recommend investors to buy the shares or not, right? But these people say that they're not interested in it. So another interesting study would be to find out whether the sustainability reports prepared using the ISSB standards are useful to analysts or not. Because by default, it is catering to those people, right? So if that's the case, then they should be using that. Let's see what's going to happen. Okay, so I'll stop there, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. When you talk about risk, okay, but I think the companies are following the finance risk, not sustainable risk. They are not worried what about what's going with the environment. But first, what about the profit? What do you think? When you were talking about the risk in research.
Yeah, I think companies do take into consideration sustainability risks because sustainability risks are financial risks, right? So if you don't think about the change in regulations in the, for instance, carbon emissions, etc., that's going to impose costs on the company. So you got to look out to see what changes are happening out there in the market, in the environment, and consider that as a risk. So we have, for instance, COVID-19 is a good example, right? It's a black swan event, of course. No one expected that. But in the future, are companies thinking about a future pandemic when they design their business strategies and when they put their disaster recovery plans in, right? So we, for instance, one of the papers I've listed there, we looked at the companies that are most affected by the pandemic and their climate risk disclosures and pandemic risk disclosures. So we looked at airline companies, cruise operators, and hotels. They were the most affected by the pandemic, right? So before the pandemic, they were not talking about a pandemic-related risk. I mean, pandemics or epidemics existed before. We had the SARS, bird flu, swine flu, etc. We had all this in the past. So although this was in a massive scale, right? So those were not pandemics, those were epidemics, but this was something completely different. But based on those experiences, these organizations should have considered these things. So that's a sustainability risk that is inherently a financial risk. How many companies in those industries went bankrupt because of the pandemic? And climate change is the next big thing, right? It's not going to happen immediately, but it's going to happen over time. And then most companies are not even thinking about the biodiversity risk. It is going to be even bigger than the climate change risk. When the environment changes completely, I mean, the things that we take for granted, food, etc., is going to be scarce. So all these risks are affecting organizations. So, this is what ISSB is trying to do, right? They want organizations to think about the impacts the society and the environment has on the organization. That's the risks that organizations face because of things like climate change. So I think that's important from an investor's perspective. So that's the first thing. First thing is organizational sustainability. The organization has to be sustainable, but at the same time, the society and the environment has to be sustainable as well, because without the other one, this one can't exist. I mean, we can say at the end, in the long term, right, organizational existence depends on the planet's existence. If there is no planet, how are organizations going to make profits? Sorry, I went further there, the question. Slippery fingers. That's right. So what I conceptualize there is, at the moment, companies provide a lot of information for investors. Investors are provided financial capital. So basically saying, okay, you gave us this much of money, and this is how we use that money. And currently, they are in this shape and form in the balance sheet. You can see that, right? So financial performance and financial position. Same way, I think if we are serious about sustainability, we need to provide information about how you have used natural resources, how you have affected the nature and the society. It's an ideal at the moment, but I think this is what's needed if we are serious about it. I don't think the world is still serious enough about it. That's why when people like me, when I say these things, some people would think that it's silly, right? Because it's silly from the current perspective. I mean, for instance, in 2007 in Australia, politicians were denying that climate change was man-made. So several governments changed because of the climate change issue. One of our prime ministers lost the election because she was trying to introduce a carbon tax. Carbon tax was implemented, existed only 1 year, it was abolished. And the government changed because of that. At that time, from 2006 to about 2009 in Australia, there was climate change denial. At least we don't have that now, right? We had that stuff. We had the IPCC reports those days too. Yeah. Yeah.
And yet there were arguments.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
Anti-science. Well, we have that here. We still have that here. Well, now they are hiding themselves, but there are still people that don't.
I mean, the things that things that developed countries are doing, it's hard for developing countries to do, right? But Australia being a developed country, they could have done much more, much earlier.
Right now, we are in a situation where the Amazon, when we think about Amazon, we think about water. Now they have a serious drop there. And about biodiversity, we have like the situation of, at the same time, like over 150 dolphins died because of the droughts. So it's not future, it's present. Right? So of course we have El Nino also, and it got like into affected it's just like you put everything together and you shake it. That's what's going on. And the pandemics, that's exactly the same. With the temperature and climate extreme events, we will have more pandemics. We will have will have problems with our agriculture. We will have problems with the food system. So it's, and then people are discussing about keep this or that, one paragraph or other, and I'm kind of tired of it. It's just, it's like on your door.
Yeah.
I think everyone that is aware of it should be somehow an activist, should be talking about this to everyone.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And doing things, and that's why I said, oh, that's nice, because even if it's not periodic, it's good for letting people know the way they could do better, they could get more information, they could be faster, and they could more efficient. So it's just
I guess the interesting thing about all this is, whatever we are going to do in the name of sustainability, in sustainability's sake, is not for the planet. Planet existed for billions of years, and it will exist. What we are trying to do is for us, for humanity. Yeah, to ensure humanity survives, the planet is going to survive. It goes through cycles, right? Ice ages and big, volcanoes and all that has happened, will happen in the future. Yeah. It will recover. Yeah.
We received a question. Professor Maísa, she's from Universidade of São Paulo. She sends to you a great presentation, thanks to you, and asking your opinion about the consequence of, if you think the S1 and S2 will improve the behavior of companies behavior. What do you think?
That's a good question. What I think is, it's good business. S1 and S2 is really good for business. It's good for investors. It is not good for the survival of humankind. Two reasons. One is that more companies will start preparing sustainability reports because it's going to be mandatory, right? So more companies will do it because they are required to do this, and they're required to use only financial materiality perspective for providing this information, right? So it means companies that were planning on looking beyond profit is now going to be brought back to a profit-centric focus. So the opportunity cost there, right? There were organizations realizing that they had to do something, but now this is imposed, and it constrains your view into financial materiality. That's one. The other is companies that are already doing sustainability reporting using GRI, for instance, because GRI is the most popular framework, most widely used sustainability reporting framework. And I think at least a significant portion of those companies that are preparing reports based on GRI will stop preparing reports based on GRI and only do ISSB reporting, because it's costly to do all that. And if they can obtain legitimacy by preparing sustainability reports according to the financial materiality perspective only, then why would they want to spend more time and collect more information? Because GRI reporting requires significant amount of information collection, and digital technologies are going to be a very important part in that. So it's costly, this is probably quite cheaper and it's good for investors. Investors would like it. So there's a big business case for ISSP reporting, but the business case for GRI reporting, at least it's not evident to most people. So I think that's the problem with ISSP reporting, but we have to see what's going to happen. Those are my predictions.
We have another question. In the professor's research, he was able to identify several conflicts in organizations between agents who seek to implement change towards for sustainability conduct and others who resist. Can you find some?
Right. So I can probably talk about that based on the interviews that we did around the use of digital technologies for sustainability reporting. So if we look at the barriers that we found for using digital technologies for sustainability reporting, it applies to sustainability in general as well, not only for using the technology, but also for sustainability as well. So the conflict is that people who are really passionate about sustainability in companies, genuinely passionate about it and want to, collect more data, provide this information, basically the sustainability people, they were struggling to make a business case to get funds to purchase these systems, right? Because organizations still think about sustainability as a cost to be minimized, not as an opportunity. So people genuinely passionate about this understand it's not only a cost, it's an opportunity as well, and also it's good for the environment. So it's a win-win from their point of view. But from the point of view of the management, it is not that. So there's this conflict, right? So here you can see the decision makers are struggling to justify the cost of sustainability systems. They can't justify it because the benefits of these systems cannot be quantified easily. Right? It's beyond quantification. There will be financial benefits, but it's very hard to quantify because of the long-term nature and and I guess the inherent nature of it. Then top managers lack knowledge about the need and benefit for systems for sustainability management and reporting as well. So they don't have the knowledge, one thing. Then, so difficulty of quantifying the impact, and then the lack of sustainability embeddedness in the organization. So this is something that was revealed in the study that I did with Professor Carol Adams as well, looking at the organizational structures, interpretive schemes, and design archetypes, right? Is that sustainability is not embedded. It is not part of the strategy. It's something else. You first design the strategy and then think, okay, what are the sustainability impacts of this strategy? That's not how it should be. So there are organizations that their strategy is from the start about the sustainability, right? So considering sustainability as an opportunity to do business, right? So these are commercial organizations. I'm not talking about social enterprises that anyway has that objective. 2022. Yeah, and early 2023. Mm-hmm.
The same result, same finding.
That's right.
It's not embedded
Yeah.
in company strategies or core business.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah. I guess the difference between 2011 and now is that some companies are doing it now. Back then, very few companies might have done it. Maybe a company like Natura, for example, back then would have done it.
More questions? Let me see here. Here we go. I think I have another one. It's what kind of organizations, type of these organizations and sectors, because you told us you are doing research with several companies, okay? Several companies. What type of market they use to operate?
Type of industry.
Yes.
Is that the first study, this one? Sorry. That first one? It's not showing there. The organization structure, is it about that study? Okay, so that one, we picked companies from different industries because it's a case study. So we had 8 case studies. We had a bank, which is one of the biggest banks in the UK. And we had a public, well, not a public sector, but a state-owned enterprise providing services to the public. It's a state-owned enterprise, so it has a profit motive. And we had an energy company. We had a fashion retailer, one of the top fashion retailers. A supply chain company, one of the world's largest supply chain companies in there. So it was a diverse set of companies.
Which one was the best press? Has the best press?
The supply chain company and a FMCG company. Yeah, and they were 2 world's biggest companies. Yeah. Unfortunately, I can't tell what companies they are because we did interviews with them, and therefore their identity has, yeah.
When you said the UI and KPMG, they respond to researchers?
Yeah.
Yes.
We spoke to some of the top people in the ESG consulting space in EY. So this was a global study, not only Australia, UK. We did interviews from people in a lot of different countries. Don't think we interviewed anyone from Brazil, though.
Well, I think I have a different experience trying to research with this kind of companies, but maybe it's just my experience. I don't know if anyone tried to do some research.
The way we did it, probably because cold calling doesn't work. The way we did it, we use our contacts. So I went through my LinkedIn contact list, checked, okay, which ones I'm interested in, and contacted them personally with a personal email through my LinkedIn.
This is your social capital.
Yes, exactly. I used my social capital as well as Carol's social capital and the other 2 researchers.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see. Okay. People send congrats. Thank you very much for your presentation and sharing your knowledge with us. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you very much, and thanks for the time. Thanks for being here and listening so patiently for more than 1 hour. And if you want to contact me, my email is there, and that's for people who are joining online as well, right? And feel free to contact me if you have any interesting research ideas or you want to collaborate with me. Yeah, I'm open to research collaborations. Thank you.
Thank you.